I should start. Welcome to the second hour of Mind Shifters Radio. Today is Monday, June the 2nd, 2025, and we're glad that you've joined us. We just finished a 9-day Why Is This Happening to Me Again intensive. It was a small but a very powerful group, and Michael's actually still doing quantum still point with one of the attendants. Everybody else went home yesterday. Had to think what day it is. And so we are rocking along, got everything back to the house and unpacked and kind of settled back into a norm. Dawn, thank you for coming up and joining us that one day.
Hope it was worth the drive, John, all the way from Atlanta to Abingdon, Virginia. That it set some things for you. And actually, Jeanie folks left the day before yesterday, Saturday.
Well, they actually, a lot of them stayed over.
Oh, some stayed over, right? Yeah, the intensive finished Saturday.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, and you might want to go ahead and announce that we're looking at an intuitive development, October 31st. At the same
Well, actually, we're looking at intuitive development, and we haven't gotten the dates back from the facility yet, but it may actually be a few days later than that. We'll see. And there have been a couple of requests for teacher training too, so we may put in 2 intensives in November. We'll just see how it all comes together.
Yay.
So welcome, and it's great to be back. We had an awesome 9 days. Absolutely, mountains moving for several people. And of course, lots of stirring, as happens in every intensive. But it was just really sweet. Urate and Tom, just did a fabulous job on the food. They brought in a new nutritional program called the Nutritarian Program. And the food was just really, really well received by everybody, and I think made a major contribution. They both worked really hard. Accolades to Tom for coming in to help Urate. And we ate fabulously well through the 9 days. And as Jeanie said, the quantum still point, actually, I've got, we theoretically completed it today, but there's another layer, so I'm actually going to do another session tomorrow.
So Dawn asked in the chat room, how many days is the intuitive development? It's 9 days. Right?
9 days. Yeah, it'll start. If we do the intuitive development and the teacher training, we'll do the intuitive development starting on a Friday. At least that's our norm now. Because of the teacher training, that may adjust somewhat. We'll probably start it on a Friday and go through a week the following Saturday, the same as we did with this. And then we'd follow it up, and we'll start the teacher training on that Sunday evening, and it'll go through the following Friday. So that's what that will look like if it all comes together. And we're not sure the facility is available yet. We've been talking with them, but things have been busy. There's a new manager at the facility, fabulous retreat center in Abingdon, Virginia, called the Jubilee House. And actually there was enough energy moving that the manager of the retreat house said, next intensive, I'm there, I'm coming, I'm going to be a participant. She got to sit in on some of the food and some of the sessions. So it was pretty cool. And I'll start out with just put it out there and see if anybody's got a thought for us. Question. You got a whole series of workshops that we just went through from our DVDs, and I can only imagine there must be questions. So if there are questions, there are thoughts, there's process to be done. Please push that mute button, unmute yourself, and say hello. What's on your mind? What moved for you during the last 9 days? What's been happening? Would love to hear from you. Again, all you have to do is unmute yourself, and we'll be having a conversation. So, Kathy, welcome. Nobody's got a word to say. 9 days without the chance to ask a question, without the chance to do some processing, and nobody has anything for us. Surely you jest. Okay. Well, in that case, I'm going to jump into another topic. Then I was listening to a video from a neuroscientist, which I found rather interesting, and how it ties into the work. The one comment that he made, that a lot of people talk about free will, and one of the experiments that they did while somebody was in an anesthetized state for pain, but fully conscious while they're doing brain surgery. And they would initiate a behavior in the brain by stimulating the brain. Like they could touch part of the brain and a person's arm would go up, or, whatever. And, there's always been a big conversation about free will, but the point he made is that they could stimulate something in the brain, and this person could inhibit or stop that particular behavior. And so he talked about free won't rather than free will, that you can turn things off in your mind if you choose to. Now, when it comes to behaviors like hostility, fear, grief, rage, drama, and trauma, most people are driven by it, but the reason they're driven by it and don't have a free won't over it is because there's so much impetus, there's so much generational reinforcement of these insane behaviors, and they come up with such an energetic impotence that they seem impossible to refuse to follow. But strengthening your free won't, as opposed to your free will, is a way to inhibit those behaviors or change them. And then, of course, the whole idea of forgiveness, that, as I see it, every time we apply forgiveness to a particular issue that has us, seems to force us into doing, or at least prompt us into doing behaviors that we say, I never want to do that again. And, yesterday afternoon, I heard Bill say he never was going to do that again. And this afternoon, he did it again. And I said, why? Well, I had 4 shots of whiskey. Oh, well, so the inhibitors were knocked out and you did what was in your brain to do. But what forgiveness does, as opposed to just inhibiting a particular behavior, is it weakens the pattern of the behavior. So if you find yourself, engaging in things that you say, I really don't want to do that, but I just don't have the willpower. Well, actually, it's the won't power that you don't have, interestingly enough, to quote this neuroscience research. And forgiveness, each time you apply it, weakens the energetic pattern. When they went back to Yeshua, you hear Peter saying to Yeshua, how many times do I need to do these darn worksheets about my brother? Is 7 times enough? And Yeshua, and I'm going to expand the answer in the context of our conversation, Yeshua would respond with, well, if there's a lot of impetus and power behind the generational pattern of doing this form of abuse that you say you don't want to do, then you might not just forgive as to your brother 7 times, but 77 times 70 times, i.e., that you're going to weaken this pattern, you're going to weaken this power person dynamic sufficiently that you free yourself of it, that it's no longer in the brain, no longer in the function of the brain that we call the mind, and recognizing that the mind functions through every cell in the body, so every cell functions to store information. And so the free won't strength or ability is enhanced by weakening the hostility and fear-based mind until its prompts are no longer overwhelming or no longer overshadow the subtler energy of choice that you might have. And this is reinforced. It thought of a poem by a woman named Ella Wheeler Wilcox. And it just kind of fits in this pattern. And she says, one ship sails east and the other west on the self same winds that blow. 'Tis the set of the sails and not the gales that determine the way she goes. Like the winds of the seas are the waves of fate. We voyage along through life. 'Tis the set of a soul that chooses its goal, and not the calm or the strife. The set of the soul. If you go back to Yeshua, they said, what's most important in the law? And we know now that the word law doesn't mean the rule of a superior, a king. We see a king wanting to come online and do whatever he wants with the so-called law today in America. And it's a so-called law because that's the rules of men. That's the rules that men set up to try and govern themselves and each other by. But law, as spoken of by Yeshua, is really a description of simply the way things work. Here's the way it happens. So they said to Yeshua, how does it work? What's it look like to be a human being? What do we do? What's most important to that? And he says a word that there is no translation for in any of the derivative languages from his Aramaic words, the Greek or the Latin. And there are no words in the English language, so we can't hear what he said. But the word, and we leave it in Aramaic, is Rakhma, Rakhma. And if you go to our website, you can go to whyagain.org. I think it's /Rakhma, and there's a whole, there are radio shows we've done on it where we've spent a lot of time explaining it and such. But it's a filter in the frontal lobes of the brain that filters out intentions based in hostility or fear and allows only intentions keyed to love to be used by our mind. This is the first law in being a human being, that your intentions are all keyed to love. And the reason intentions are so important is because intentions are the raw material of your goals. And so an intention alignment with Rakhma, as Ellen Wheeler Wilcox says, it is the set of the soul. Rakhma would be the set of the soul. Is the soul in charge of this body-mind unit? And recognizing other things this neuroscientists were talking about is, that they've done in one particular case. They had a young boy or a child that was born, and the child was born with no brain, just no brain. And the recommendation of the hospital was it would be better to let this child die because they have no brain. They're never going to function. And he, as a surgeon, had seen many people who functioned without what we would call full-fledged brains. And so he changed that order, and they fed the child, and he knows the child yet today. And the child is a young man who he's handicapped because there's no brain function for, motor skills and such. But the child is without a brain, is very aware and, fully aware emotionally, doesn't have speech. There are handicaps, but is a full human being. And he goes through several other examples of people who've, 2/5 of their brain, fifths of their brain are gone, and they're fully normal functioning PhDs with, born with 2/5 of their brain missing. So what does that say? It says the brain is an instrument. It is not the being. Now, there is a being that's brainwashed into the brain. Yeshua said that being has to be removed. And if we understand this thing called Rakhma, it is the thing that sets the soul. And again, the reason why that set is so important, why it runs the show, is because it filters out all negative and destructive intentions and leaves only intentions keyed to love available. And the reason that's important is because intentions are literally the raw material of our goals. So if the set is right, then the perception, the guidance system that's going to guide us into behavior is going to be on track. So when Rakhma is active, intentions are keyed to love only, and the secondary function of that filter called Rakhma is that it's also a gateway that brings human life into our human forms. And so we see an instrument, and someone who we would say is really unruly, negative, destructive, insane, crazy, all the words we might apply to someone that is off base with the standard of behavior of the culture, is to recognize that it is the instrument doing that. And when the being is contacted, when the soul is contacted, when the soul is supported in awakening, then we have the presence of a human life. And so the word that's been applied, and it was interesting, this man speaking solely and completely, and I was kind of shocked when he first introduced his conversation, because he said that as a surgeon, having operated on hundreds of brains, that he felt the whole idea of spiritual life should be in the realm of neuroscience. Because recognizing as a neuroscientist that life, choice, volition, inhibiting behaviors doesn't depend on the brain. People without brains have all those functions. So they're not of the brain. Now, is the brain an instrument of expression? Yes. And so this work is about supporting each person in upgrading their instrument and making it a fit device for expression in the world. It's interesting, in just the last 10 days or so, and this isn't something that I've heard over the years, but in the last 10 days or so, I've heard from people. In one case, it was a woman who we talked to 2 weeks ago, and she had been beat up by her husband, and then he brought her to a workshop. And she sat there in the workshop, and this is 30 years ago. And, he forced her to come under duress after having beaten and bruised her face. She said she came to the workshop, she sat back, like she wasn't there, but she listened. And she said, that's the day that I got my life. I realized that I wasn't alive till then. And it's interesting, we've had about 6 people who've made that statement. And just since she said that, that was kind of like a shocker for me. It's like, I got my life. I started my life that day. And, life is not of the body. It is not of the mind. It is not of the brain. Those things are an instrument of expression. There's no life there. There's activity. There's memory. There are generational patterns. There's rage and guilt and grief and fear and skills and traumas. But there's no life there until there is a being, a soul. We have the non-being mind, a false image of who we've been told we are. But when the gateway is open, and the objective of this work is to open that gateway and support one in having the tools, life shows up. Now, go back and you hear Yeshua 2,000 years ago, and of course, the way you hear churchianity speaking about it, you'd think that Yeshua came to bring dogma or doctrine or religious beliefs or religious, rituals. But Yeshua never said anything about bringing any of those things. What he did say is, I come to bring you life. And what I'm hearing now, new brain cells for me, is I come to assist you in opening Rakhma so your human life comes awake and alive in your human form. And you express from there through this instrument called a body-mind unit. And by the way, he says, I got some tools for you. If there's dysfunction, if there's rage, if there's guilt, if there's hostility, if there are cultural dynamics that we would call insane relative to a being called love, then he says, I've got some tools for you to clean up your instrument, to upgrade your instrument and make of it a fit vehicle for your journey here on the earth. So there's no actual life in the instrument. It appears perhaps that there's one, but there's no actual life there. And when one uses the tools and removes the non-being expression, the expression of rage, of guilt, of fear, of hatred, of vengeance, of all the things that never belong in a human system, when those things are removed, then there is the upgrade of human life. And that's what we're here to do. And to open the gateway for that human life to show up in your human form. And, if we listen to Yeshua 2,000 years ago, he spoke of a thing that was called the kingdom of heaven, or that the Greeks mistranslated as the kingdom of heaven. But what he was speaking of was the community of love. Literally, if we were to translate the words kingdom of heaven properly from the Aramaic, the words would be much closer to the community of love. And you remember that he said, the Greeks interpret him as saying, the kingdom of heaven, if somebody tells you it's over there or over there, believe them not, for it is here, it is now, it is within you. The community of love starts when your human life, when the gateway is open for your human life to show up in your human form and to run the show in contradiction to the non-being mind, the generational mind, the self that Yeshua said, in order for you being to live, you non-being have to die. That self needs to be dismantled. That self that is based in hostility or fear and pretends to have life, but it has no life. All it has is information and expression, and it can't change its own expression. So when Yeshua talks about, I come to bring you life, I come to support you in opening the gateway. And, for me, this work is about being the most accurate and the most direct and the most supportive I can comprehend with my limited mind and being, to bring forward accurately what he created. And one of the things I realized this week as we went through this 9-day intensive, we cover a lot of material. We cover on creating consciously and why is this happening to me again, healing through relationships, purpose. And I just had a realization on another level for me of just how much he brought in 2,000 years ago. And if you've got access to the Aramaic, it survived, and we have access to it yet today. And it's just, monumental. But first and foremost, to tap each person on the shoulder and say, you are an original being designed to come into this world as conscious, active, present love and bring the gift of your being and your purpose to the world and fulfill that. And so what we're here for, what this work is about, is to offer tools to each person to do the work required to rid themselves of the automatic mind, the generational mind of hostility or fear, and to bring full expression into form the original design of the human being, which is, if you watch someone when the hostility or fear mind gets quiet, who are they? It's blessing, it's being, I've asked thousands of people over the years, how many remember a time when you looked around at the world and you said to yourself, this is not the way it's supposed to work? This strife, this conflict, this rage, this guilt, this fear, this is something that's taken over that we're not designed to be doing. And virtually everybody remembers, looking through little eyes, 3, 4, 5 years of age and going, this isn't it. But then not having the power to overcome it, succumbing to the brainwash of the one world universal religion of guilt, fault, blame, shame, and suffering, and coming to believe that it was inescapable. But it's not what we're here for. And so when Yeshua says, I come to bring you life, he's right on the mark. And when people start to wake up from the false image in their mind of who they thought they were to the truth of who they actually are, then a whole different game in town. So that's the game we're here to play with you. And we're delighted that you're here. And once again, I'd like to just check in. We're at the halfway point of the show. Anybody out there with a question, a thought, something to share, something that's going on in your world? And hopefully these tools will bring you more and more into alignment with the truth of who you are, bring you into a stronger and stronger alignment with your true being, where, when you look at what's gone on for humanity over the centuries, over the eons, the rage, the guilt, the fear, the pain, the loss, the suffering, the trauma, you look around, you say, it's everywhere, it's everywhere. Yeah, it is. Why? Because there are generations and generations of that programmed into us. Who's got the courage to step up and say, okay, I'm going to take charge of my instrument and I'm going to clean it out. I'm going to deal with, free my bloodline from the hostility, the fear, the grief, the rage, the pain, the drama, and the trauma. And of course, it's no easy task when you look at how much support there is in the world for crazy. You look at how many people are suffering in deep pain. How can you tell if somebody's suffering in deep pain? Well, just take a look at the hostility and the fear. That's what those things are signals of. And to open the instrument, basically what the quantum still point process is about, is to open the structure of this physiological device called a body-mind unit to become aligned with and incarnate the truth of who we are as human beings, to come into alignment with the active presence of love. And, Yeshua talked 2,000 years ago about how the path is very broad, but the gate is narrow and few will be that find it. And few know or understand that the gateway is in physiology and realigning. If you've got a TV antenna on the roof and the signal on your TV is poor, you can't go up to the antenna and say, hey, would you try harder to get a better signal? what would you do? You'd go into the whole antenna system, the receiver system, and you'd bring it into closer alignment with the frequencies it's designed to receive. And when you do that, then your signal gets better, your TV picture gets better, your sound gets better. It's no different. The human being is the signal coming into this instrument. If the instrument is marred with generations and generations and generations of rage and guilt and grief, you remember that story about the Jews wandering the desert for 40 years. It wasn't about a hot, sandy place that was 35 square miles, I promise you. You know, they were bright enough, they knew enough about astronomy to go, oh, we're lost in this 35 square mile area. Let's see, let's get up in the morning and start to follow the sun. How long is it going to take to get out of a 35 square mile area if you simply follow the sun east? Or that rises in the east? You're going to be out of the desert pretty quickly. But that word desert in Aramaic isn't talking about the hot, sandy place. It's talking about the unconscious dynamics of 1,000 generations in each of us. And what did they say had to happen to get out of the desert? Read that passage. What does it say? It says the old generation has to die off. Now, that's not about people in physical bodies physically dying. The root of the word generation is genari. It means cause. The causes originated in one generation after another, passed on to the next, to the next, to the next. You know, there's nobody on this planet that's escaped the rage, the wars, the slaughters, the starvation, the suffering. None of us. I don't care if it's kings or queens. And so what's in our genes? It's a much more important question to ask the advertising question of what's in your wallet. What's in your genes that inhibits life? What needs to be forgiven to make a pathway for life, active present love, to enter your form? What's going to have to be faced? What's going to have to be moved out of your structure? What's going to have to be forgiven? What creates the inclination toward hopelessness, helplessness, pain and suffering? Generational patterns that can be forgiven. And we can, if we choose to do our work, have a near life experience at every moment. Now, what's a near life experience? Well, it's what most people call a near death experience. You know, because the world's got everything backward, they call a near life experience a near death experience. What is it the world calls a near death experience? Well, somebody, let's say, was injured in a car accident or whatever, and they experienced clinical death. They happen to be resuscitated after death had been pronounced. And they come back. And they have stories. And they tell about all kinds of things. This neuroscientist I was talking about earlier, he was talking about one researcher who was doing brain surgery on a woman, and he had to kill her in order to do this brain surgery, i.e. put her into a brain dead state. He described what they did. First of all, they cooled her body to 50 degrees. This woman had an aneurysm, and they could not do surgery in her normal state. They cooled her body to 50 degrees. I mean, talk about cold. And then they stopped her heart. So this woman is brain dead. And he's repairing this. He drains all of the blood out of her brain. Dropping the body to 50 degrees slows down the metabolism to next to zero. So the structure can survive without blood flow. literally drains her brain of blood, so she is totally brain dead, repairs the aneurysm, puts the blood back in her body, starts her heart, and warms her up. And after the surgery, she tells the doctor what he did. She describes the operation. She describes the instruments. She describes the conversations that were in the room. And the doctor's like, "You can't do that. You were dead." I said, "Well, doc, here, let me tell you. Here's the music." She told him the songs that were playing in the room while she was dead. Body is not life. Body is just a place, an instrument for the expression of life. Her life remained in the room when she was put into a brain dead state. Awareness is not of the mind. The mind is simply an instrument of awareness. The desert is the unconscious. Most people spend about 40 years without the gateway of Rakhma being open, being run by whatever's in the system, the hostilities, the fears, the generational patterns, the behaviors of the generations. And along comes Yeshua and says, "I come to restore you to life. I come to bring you life, life more abundantly, to tap you on the shoulder and wake you up beyond the function of your mind, beyond the challenges in your family, beyond the vicissitudes of your culture, beyond the limitations of your physiology. I come to bring you a near life experience." So when clinical death occurs, it isn't a near death experience. That person's dead. That person's body, clinically, legally, medically defined as dead. But life carries on. Life continues. There's a really good film out there if you haven't seen it. True story, it's a book as well. Saved by the Light. Daniel Brinkley, a friend of ours. Haven't seen him in a few years, but we crossed paths with him over the years. But watch that film and watch what near life, watch what happens when carbon-based memory comes back online. He very clearly in the film, he was involved in the making of the film about his clinical death experience. He showed what his carbon-based memory life was like as a youth. He was an SOB. He admitted it. He was mean. He was nasty. He was vicious. He liked to kill people. He took on a job of being a hired government killer. Part of the movie is showing him going back and having to process those atrocities that he did. And it shows him being lost in carbon-based memory, then finding himself, being lost in carbon-based memory and finding himself. When clinical death occurs, carbon-based memory shuts its mouth. When carbon-based memory shuts its mouth, we get to experience who we are as created love. If one who's experienced that clinical death is fortunate enough to come back online, then life generally changes pretty significantly. I don't necessarily suggest you go out and try to find yourself in near-death experience. It's a very risky way of doing it. But here's my offering. Each time you do a worksheet, you collapse carbon-based memory, the output of carbon-based memory. Now, it may only be for a fraction of a second, but that's a near-life experience. It's no different than someone who experiences clinical death. Carbon-based memory crashes. The output of the perceptual mind shuts down. And that's exactly what forgiveness does. Now, there are micro experiences, but you do enough micro experiencing and tasting human life. collapsing carbon-based memory, even if it's just for an instant before the mind jumps back in and, keeps its game going. But you give yourself time to start to savor and taste that state of being that is your true human life. And that true human life is the same for all of us. So this work is about supporting people, finding that, and it can be a pretty grueling experience to go back through all the generational patterns of fear and rage and guilt and pain and suffering and, death and drama and trauma and loss and relationship insanity. It can be quite a challenge, but it can be done. And usually when people first start to, when carbon-based memory collapses and they first start to taste and feel themselves as human beings, there's this faint memory of, oh, I remember this. This is it. Of course, then carbon-based memory, if there's been a violent past, comes back online with its violence and overrides that, even though one may wish to behave from that state of being. If awareness of oneself as a being beyond physiology is fresh, and one's used to being run by the dynamics in carbon-based memory, it's going to take some time. It's going to take some wielding. It's going to take some work. People oftentimes come to it and then go away, come back to it, go away, come back to it, go away many times as they more and more discover who they are as the created essence of active present love. So we're here to support you in that experience. And what's your thought about that?
Michael, there's a question in the chat room.
Yes, sweetie.
Is the neurosurgeon interview that you talked about on YouTube? And if you
it is, let me find it. Let me turn to it. And it's really awesome. I mean, it's just fabulous. Let's see. Give me a second here to turn. I had saved it. Let me get to the file I saved it in. The title of the video is the soul real? Question mark. A neuroscientist, pardon me, the scientific evidence for the soul. So is the soul real? And let me just see if I can copy that and put it right in the notes here. Let me get back over to the app and the chat. There it is in the it's not actually a link to the video, but the title of it, at least in detail. Let me see if I can get the actual link and put it in there as well. Give me just 1 second. In the meantime, what are your thoughts? What's on your mind? How can we support you? If you have a thought for us, all you need to do is
So
just
Linda,
unmute
go
yourself.
ahead.
Pardon?
You
Go
unmute.
ahead. Hey there. Hey there, young lady. How are you?
I'm good. Who's talking in the background? Jeanie?
Yes.
Hi, Jeanie. How are you, dear heart?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
I'm so glad you're all on Zoom. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And how about you, young lady? How are you doing?
I'm doing. I'm letting my cat be my reparenting agent.
Cool.
He's my reparenting therapist. And I had an aha the other day because she's now in a situation where our hosts have a husky, and the husky loves to chase cats. And so she's been locked down in the motorhome, which you can imagine being a semi-feral cat is not a happy little beast. And so she's been yowling her head off, and we have been trying to shut her up, basically. You know, the good old power person parent rules, right? They're control freak. And I woke up the other day, and I said, wait a minute. I said, if I want her to soothe her down, what is the best possible way I can do it?
Smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, I can be love. And it's interesting because I kept identifying with her behavior as my little girl who wanted to go live with her daddy behavior, only I withdrew, of course, because I was afraid of being hurt. So I withdrew instead of being the bully, I chose the victim, right? And now I was the bully because I had more power over my little cat, and I had more power over my kids, and I just, all of those flashbacks on back memories. And so I said, I'm going to practice Sylvia Boorstein's be gentle, dear heart. You're in pain. Put your hand on your heart and be gentle with yourself. And I thought, well, if I'm supposed to be gentle with myself, which I'm not, I wasn't, you know, I was beating myself up for not being the perfect mother again, once more around the desert, right? And then I said, okay, I can be love. And if she wants to complain and yowl at top decibel, which can shatter a crystal glass, I can still respond in love. And I shared it with Larry, too, because he was under the same dynamics of getting more and more irritated. And so I just started doing it. I didn't tell him he should do it or anything. I just said, that's what I'm going to do. She's a different cat now.
Mm-hmm.
Still under the same situation, but a different cat. And not only that, but the host said, hey, I can put the dog in the house for a couple hours so she can go outside if you want me to do that. And now that it's getting hotter, I'm going to be doing that more often anyway. It's because she's a husky and got a lot of fur. And she's a total sweetheart. She just wants to chase cats. You know?
Right. Playtime.
And yeah, playtime. What a lousy play partner. You know, they don't want to play with me. But anyway, so the behavior, it happened from one night. It happened from the morning that I had that revelationary experience. And now we're in the evolutionary process to see how well it works. And I just insist on being love. And I thought, oh my God, I'm reparenting myself at the same time. And I'm being reparented by this cat. And this cat, I'm reparenting this cat, and this cat is reparenting me. And hey, it's wild.
One of the quotes that I used during the intensive was from Max Planck, who won the Nobel Prize in Physics for the discovery of quantum physics, originating the theory of quantum physics. And one of the things that he says is, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, i.e., it's a participatory universe. Right. When we realize that none of it's independent of us, then it's a game changer for sure.
Say that quote one more again.
When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
I'm going to write that down.
When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. You know, and his thing was quantum physics, and in quantum physics, one of the things that they offer is that no thing exists until it is measured or observed. And they talk about the observer effect. And what is the observer effect except that when something appears in the world that resonates something in us, that which resonates in us sets up an interchange signal with that which is going on in the world. And it is the exchange of energy of that resonance that causes the quantum potential to come into expression, to solidify, to actually become the thing.
So we're not going to put our attention on anything that doesn't resonate for us already.
You can't. If you don't have brain, Yeshua 2,000 years ago, you got to have the eyes to see, the ears to hear. If you don't have the brain cells, it's not even there for you.
Yeah, so you see, but you don't look. It's when you look. Oh, I get it now. Okay.
When your mind holds no meaning for it, you're open to create. If your mind already has a meaning from the past, then, oh well, the past comes up and there it is, and we end up replicating the creative process. One of the workshops we did that, for me, this last week, one of the workshops in the Why Intensive is why is this happening to me again? And what opened for me, just kind of on a new level, is that this idea of being a conscious co-creator of our world rather than just unconscious, whatever energetic patterns are in us. That's the world we see. That's the world we live in. That's the world we express in. But that there is an option, and that is if we choose to remove the brain cells, that the content, forgive, that which is about what we'd like to be finished with, and then bring in source different levels of information input, then we get to live in a different, first we get to live, and second we get to live in a different world. That makes sense?
I'm going to have to go, yes, it does. But at the same time, I'm going to have to listen to that. Remember, I said repetition is my most profound healing modality.
Sure. Yes.
I'm going to have to listen to what you just said in the last 5 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it was. When you started with, when your mind has no meaning for something, and then I lost it, of course, because I was trying to write it down. I couldn't remember the rest, although I heard it. I have thought that we are co-creative beings, that this whole creation is co-creative, but yes. I hadn't put it in reference to resonance and the observer effect. I hadn't realized how much what's based in our past memories and resonances, for positive or negative, how much of an effect they have.
Well, literally,
in relation to what we put attention on.
Right. Well, you remember, I've talked in other shows about the Global Science Conference I used to keynote at decades ago, and Marcel Vogel came with his Delaware camera. And the idea, or what he brought that camera to show us, was that he was able to take a picture of the high energy waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. When there is the activity of electrons moving, those electrons moving set up an energy wave. If I have a whole awareness that is moving in me, then there is literally a measurable high energy wave coming from me. And if it finds a field with which it is in resonance, interacts, then it adds energy through resonance to whatever that is. And that's our creatorship. It's a physics dynamic. It's literally how we create the world we see and live in. And of
That
course,
would be a
the one
great document.
the one we paint on the inside of our eyeballs.
I wouldn't mind having that written down and put in one of the tools as a document to play with that, because I just the whole resonance, and there is a connection with the difference between seeing and looking too. Somehow I find a connection.
Right.
Looking is not seeing. Seeing
That's right.
is not looking. They both have to work, but looking is conscious.
And there's a powerful lesson in the Course in Miracles for people starting out with wanting to rid themselves of the past that seems so real. And that is, I have given all the meaning it has for me. And when I choose to remove a meaning, when I choose to forgive, then that energetic dynamic disappears from my life. It no longer resonates or draws in people who are in accord with it.
And then we come to emotion. The emotion is the driver of my goals. The intention drives my emotion. My emotion comes from my thought. My thought drives my emotion, which drives my intention, which drives my goal. Whoa. That's our power base. It's the heart, dear heart. The heart that has the power. Because the heart is the central thing between, the pivotal point between our thoughts and our actions. That's just
And
something
of course,
I'm playing with. Is this true?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, the heart is just a part of the instrument.
Right.
It's the being that sources the information. It's a being, we're the only creature that we know of in the whole creation that can originate something that's never been seen before in the world. We, you, I, each of us has the ability to originate something new. In the 9-day intensive, when we did the purpose, personal power, and commitment section of it, we point out that, if we're in alignment with our purpose, then we source energies that are in alignment with our purpose rather than get stuck in energies from the generational past that are unresolved. And as one originates a new energy, one literally sets up this quantum field that then begins to bring that into literal expression in the world. Creatorship, like we're designed for that.
Okay, Jeanie and Michael, this show needs to be highlighted, and this part that we started talking about, this part specifically, our conversation, I think would be amazing as a highlight. I don't know about anybody else, but for me, it's like, I think I've got a popping brain cells right and left and replacing with new ones.
Yeah. So you can go, when Jeanie gets this posted on YouTube, you can go there and you can just get a transcript of it. And there it is. One of the features of YouTube these days. So cool. Yes, very cool. All right. Well, we're at 2:00.
If I'm a member. Okay. I'm a member, though. I have to be one of your followers, right?
No. I mean, it'd be nice if you go to our YouTube channel and join it. It doesn't cost anything or anything, but no, you can just go to any of our videos and get a transcript of it right there on YouTube.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Oh, great.
All right. Well, thank you for the conversation. Appreciate you extending love in your direction. Hope your garden's going well. Blessings, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.